start laughing, but trying to be quiet. And then I hear behind me this, and they give me this chainsaw thing. And I'm going, oh, my God.
Oh, no.
And I had to, I was up in that cow to my shoulders. And I turned every color of the rainbow. I'd lost groceries a couple of times. And I skinned this thing. I cut it. They didn't do anything except watch and chew their tobacco. And I got this thing cut up in all kinds of sections. And
just one thing I'm curious about.
Yeah.
Did the cows come back and look at you after all this?
Actually, they did. They're a forgiving animal, and they get used to routines, and that was a little bit much for them. But everything settled down, and my dad showed up while I was just finished the cow, and they told him what happened, and my dad was going to pay for the cow, and they said no. And as a matter of fact, they gave us half the cow for the winter.
Really?
They had such a great time watching me turn colors. So I was really blessed with having some really supportive people in the area at that time. But,
well, I guess you were nurtured properly.
Yeah,
all right.
I had good people around me, and so anyhow, and the farmer's wives made a hat for it. It was a baseball cap, and they stitched this name in it, really neat name. It was Speed, and it's not S-P-E-E-D, it's S-T-E-P-D, which is short for Stampede. So my nickname stuck like glue. My name was Speed from there on.
I see. All right. Well, then it wasn't that much longer until I want you to tell the Area 51 story.
Okay.
I really want you to tell that story again.
Right.
I listened the first time and I went, oh, come on, this can't be true.
Right.
But it is true, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's why we're validating it by backing up here, showing you how it was a natural progression. See, by launching all these rockets and building all this stuff, it wasn't long before I was in newspapers all the time. Since I was in the newspapers so much, you attract other attention.
Prodigy kid.
Yeah, well, that's what they called me, and I don't know about that. I think I'm more like Forrest Gump, just in the right place at the right time. But what happened was my congressman of the area, at this time we had moved from North Carolina to Ohio. So from 6th grade to graduation in high school, I was living in Mount Vernon, Ohio.
Right.
So at this time, the local congressman saw me, how much I was in the newspapers. I was winning lots of science awards and such. And he was running for re-election. He was about to lose. He was losing in the polls some. So he comes over and he grabs me and asks me if I wanted to go to some political picnics and parties. And I said, sure. So we go over there and we show up, and while he's standing there, and these people show up and runs over and puts his arm around me, gets his picture taken. And I read the newspaper, all these wonderful things he's done for me, and I'm going, this guy ain't done anything for me. So the congressman, his name was John Ashbrook, and so I got Congressman Ashbrook off to the side, and I said, look, here, I need this. And I gave him a list about as long as your leg. And he goes, what is all this? Is this a list of materials I need and special help with this new type engine I want to build? And he goes, I can't help you. That looks like hundreds of thousands of dollars. I said, yeah, it's more than that, actually. But I said, yeah, you're going to help me. And he goes, why? I said, because if you don't, I'm going to walk over there to the press and tell them you've been dragging me around like a puppet on a string. You haven't done squat for me, and you won't be elected to a dog catcher.
You really said that?
I certainly did, because I was serious about this. And he said, after seeing my face, he said, you're serious? I went, yeah, I'm serious.
Let me see the list again, son.
Yeah, well, he said, this is blackmail. I said, I know, I learned it from your colleagues. So, anyway...
you're lucky to be alive. You're lucky to be alive, actually.
Well, that's where the whole thing started getting interesting, because at first he was a little upset. Then he really got pretty congenial about things, and later on I found out why, because who he had talked to. So the money came through, and his office handled the appropriations, and off we went. So
you had a bunch of money, huh?
It was a bunch. And then I had to have special materials. Now, I had pretty much everything I need on conventional things, but this engine was totally different.
What were you going to build?
This is an electromagnetic fusion containment engine. Now,
wait a minute. An electromagnetic fusion containment engine.
Right.
Now, first of all, as far as I knew, we had not yet achieved fusion. Now, I understand that...
At that time?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been around for a while. In 1973, AAAS, the American Association for Advancement of Science, wrote a book called The Future in Energy, and they talked all about electromagnetic fusion containment in the Soviet reactors, the Breeder-Maka reactors.
Okay, the way you contain a fusion reaction is with electromagnetism. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In other words, you form a field around it. That's the only thing that keeps it where it is.
Right.
And if it gets out of where it is, that's bad.
yeah, it's real bad. It gets kind of warm.
All right, so you suddenly had all these materials, and you started building this thing.
Right.
And you were how old?
Let's see, at this time, 13, almost 14. I
Almost?
started when I was right around, 17, about 13 years old when I started.
How long did you work on this?
I worked on it for about 4 years, up until I was 17 years old. And it was
Did you have help?
I had a lot of help. There was, not only did I have the financial help, I also had this big state-of-the-art machine shop. I had other machinists around me, but then with the funding, I could hire other machine shops, subcontract stuff off-the-shelf equipment and materials, which was everywhere at that time that we could use. So it was a collective effort, but it got even more crowded, I guess, because the congressman brought in a person who functioned like a project manager, and this was a retired Air Force general at the time named Curtis LeMay.
Oh, he was the big guy when I was in the Air Force.
Right. So he was retired, and if you look in the back of his autobiography book called Iron Eagle, and flip to the back of it, you will see that his parents were residing in a convalescent care facility in Mount Vernon, Ohio,
right,
at the same exact time years I was building this rocket. And that's a direct tie-in because my mother was an LPN, licensed practical nurse, and she was the personal caregiver to LeMay's parents.
Oh.
So with that going on, and he had learned about me, and then the congressman knew about LeMay's parents being his district. He knew LeMay. He asked LeMay if he would be interested in helping out with this thing, and since he had listened to my mother for a couple years on me, he agreed to, and that's how this whole thing happened. It just, circumstance come together. So LeMay was quite helpful because of his former position of being a SAC commander and a Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he was quite helpful in obtaining fuels and things that we needed, which wasn't easy to get. So what happened, though, when he entered the project, there was a whole shift of change. The Air Force showed up in force, and I was allowed to work on it and do everything I needed, and they were very helpful. Everybody was extremely helpful. All kinds of materials and support, and aid was coming, and everything from personnel to supplies to everything. So the reason why they wanted to see if this thing would work.
Of course.
And being a child at the time, they just thought I was so naive I didn't know what was happening, but I could tell this thing suddenly became government-owned. So I became, at that age, a government project.
So so they were watching you, I suppose.
Every day.
Every day?
Every day. There was somebody there because I'd go to school.
Uniform-type guys or black suit guys or what?
Both. Sometimes it was civilian clothes, sometimes uniform. Sometimes they'd alternate, be the same person wearing either a suit or a uniform, depending, I guess, whatever their status was for the day. But they'd come and go, and they really were very helpful, and they just were assisting. And I got to really do all my work, so it didn't bother me.
How big was this thing?
It's 10 feet tall.
10 feet tall.
Right. So that's the height from the floor to a basketball goal hoop. So
yeah, that'd be about right, I guess.
That's 10 foot. So it was in my shop, and I was allowed to work on it all the time. So it became the only thing we had to do, though, or I had to agree to, was we had to stop letting the press in to photograph. Although I did get some neat. I was on the front page of Mount Vernon News, standing alongside of it.
I take it you've got photographs of it.
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of newspaper stories on it. I've got a lot of people seen them.
But the technology that you were developing, specifically with the drive, the engine.
It was a little bit different, and but it's not like I invented this. Far from it. There are 60 engines cataloged in NASA right now in Huntsville, Alabama, at the Marshall Space Flight Center in the Advanced Research Program that can get you off this planet. They have had these things cataloged for decades and decades. The two engines that you're familiar with is a solid rocket propellant and a liquid fuel.
That's correct.
Wernher von Braun was an extremely good salesman in that area, and that's what we bought into. We've been there ever since. But there are 57 other engines, and I just picked one of the other 57.